Hey everybody, welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yee, and today I'm going to be going over my top 10 favorite trick-taking games. This is a genre of games that I've enjoyed for a while, but I've really gotten into them more and more lately. And so, generally speaking, they follow a similar format. Everybody's dealt a hand of cards. One person will lead with a color or a suit of card, and then everybody else around the table will play one card at a time, following that suit usually, and whoever plays the highest one is going to win the trick, win the set of cards. And that person will lead, and everybody keeps playing one at a time until your hand of cards runs out. That's the general format that these mostly follow, but the differences between them can be very subtle sometimes, or can be very drastic. I have some that have some subtle little nuance to them, and other ones which are wildly different, so I'm excited to show you what my 10 favorite games are. Why I like trick-taking games as much as I do is that there's something that feels very classic about holding a hand of cards and playing them out. And sometimes you use a standard deck of cards. There are two of them on my list here that use a standard, what you would call a standard deck of cards, the French style or English style cards. So my number 10 is one of those, but it uses a modified deck. The game is called Truque. Truque is a two-player only betting trick-taking game. Wherein you are dealt 3 cards only, and the suits don't matter. This is one of those wild exceptions. So instead of having a normal hand of 13-ish or so cards, you have 3. And you can play or you can bow out and let the other person win the point. And the reason that you might do that is because instead of playing a card, or before you play a card, if you're the lead, you could propose to raise the number of points that this hand is worth. If I feel pretty good about my hand, or if I want to bluff, I could say propose 2 points for whoever wins 2 or 3 of the tricks of these 3. And then the opponent could then bow out, letting me get the point, or they could say, sure, I accept, raise to 2. And so then I could bid up to 3. I can keep raising the number of points that this hand is going to be worth. However, it's just a race to, I believe, 8 points, or depending on what variation you play. So do I really want to keep bidding if I don't think my hand is that strong to win? Or am I going to be able to bid so high that my opponent then folds and lets me get those points? It's a really neat, little weird dynamic. Like I said, the suits don't matter, which is very unusual. You play one card, the opponent plays a card. Whoever wins that trick, just based on highest value. I like it. It is kind of like a poker-esque card for 2 players, and I can kind of see this being a little bit of the inspiration between the Land, Air, and Sea card game from Arcane Wonders. I'm not saying that it is, but I can kind of see some of that historical basis of how a little poker-ish game for 2 players could work really well. So my number 10, Truque. My number 9 is a newer trick-taking card game that is a bit more difficult, has a lot more nuance to the game. It is called Take the A-Chord. I really like this Sashi and Sashi game. The art is very charming. The theme of it being a jazz band with improvisation, I think is really neat and very cool. But it is one of the most difficult to explain trick-taking games on my list. Maybe the most difficult, because there's a lot of nuance to it. You can play a card that matches the value of an earlier card, and that causes a key change. There's no inherent value to the cards. They're not numbered. So there's never a 10 that's better than a 4. They're all based off of a musical scale, A through G, based on musical notes. And if you change the chord, if you change the key of the improvisation being played, then you can change what value is the best, which one is closest to the key change value. So there's some weird things. It has a neat 2-player mode where each player plays 2 cards out of their hand that I kind of enjoy. This is one that I find charming, despite the difficulty of the rules. It's not impossible to play, but it's trickier. I'm going to try not to say tricky too much on this list, but it's a trickier one, but I find it really engaging. So that's why that's my number 9 is Take the A-Chord. My number 8 is the other game that uses a standard deck of cards. This, to me, is kind of like the standard trick-taking game that I think of. I think of Spades. I know for some people it's Hearts, for other people it's Bridge that uses that classic deck of cards. But for me, it's Spades. I really like it. This one uses what's called the trump suit, being the titular spades. Spades will win out against other cards, but you can't just play them, you have to follow suit if possible. So you're trying to run out of the other cards in order to be able to play spades, to be able to play the trump suit and take the tricks when you want to. And the secret is that this is a bidding one, not a betting one, but a bidding. At the start of the deal, you have 13 cards in your hand in front of you, and you are trying to bid how many tricks of the 13 you think you'll win. That's a tough dynamic. It makes it a little bit more difficult. I don't use this as an introductory trick-taking game, despite the relative simplicity of the rules, because that bidding part is hard. But as you start figuring out, right, what is a good hand? Can I bid 4, 5, 6, maybe sometimes 8 if I have a ridiculously great hand? Can I bid 0? If I nil bid, I could win 100 points in a round, but if I win even one trick, it'll cost me 100 points. It's also played in teams. So you and the person across the table are playing against the other two sitting across each other. And so there's a lot of reasons why this one is a really good, smooth trick-taking game, but also has some important subtlety that I think makes it not necessarily the greatest introductory one. But I like that. I tend to prefer my games being individual, but the team nature of this one works really well. Spades is a classic to me. That's my number 8. My number 7 is a game called David and Goliath. David and Goliath is a cutely themed trick-taking game wherein you want to either play the highest card or the lowest card in a trick. If you play the lowest card in a trick, you will win the highest card as a scoring card. And then whoever played the highest one will win all the other cards. So it works well, 3, 4, 5, I believe it goes up to 6 players. So I like that range at which I think it plays well. And you just keep playing until you run out of cards in your hand. And what's neat is playing the lowest card will get you possibly the biggest value scoring card, because then you score up the cards in front of you at the end of the game. But playing the highest one scores you a lot of cards, which is a great trade-off. But the thing is, at the end of the game, at the end of the hand of cards, you're going to look at the scoring cards in front of you, and if you only have 1 or 2 cards of a particular color, then you're going to score the face value of the card. If you played a 1 and won a 10, that card could be worth 10 points at the end of the game, which feels fantastic. However, if you have 3 or more of the same color of card, you don't score the face value of the card, you only score 1 point per blue card you have. So maybe you just go wild and try to win a bunch of blue cards, because you know you're never going to get the 12-point face value. You're just going to keep getting fed blue cards, but that's still points. It's got a good dynamic, and so that's why that's my number 7, David and Goliath. My number 6 is a game that is a little bit more rambunctious. This is kind of like Spades with the bidding. It's called Skull King. Skull King is a fun pirate-themed trick-taking game, and it has a couple of wacky elements to it. You have the numbered cards. You also have the black pirate flag trump suit, and then on top of that you have super trump cards, which are the pirates, which will always win, and then you have the grand pirate, which will, or the dread pirate card, which will trump over all other cards, and then there's also sail away cards that normally you have to follow suit, but you can play these sail away cards if you would otherwise have to win a trick, and you can just play this card and say, nope, I want nothing to do with this one. It's a neat dynamic. So at the start of each round, on the first round, you're dealt 1 card, and everybody bids simultaneously how many tricks they think they will win this round. 1 or 0. And then the second round, you're dealt 2 cards, and then you bid how many you think you're going to win out of these 2 tricks. And you go up, it's 10 rounds, and I think that's a tad bit long, is maybe my one complaint. But it's fun because around the table, everyone is slamming the table. You're supposed to bid by saying, yo, ho, ho. Hold up 2 fingers for, I think I'm going to win 2 of these 5 tricks, for example. If you hit your bid dead on, you get points, and if you don't, then you don't. or you could also nil bid. You could bid 0, and you're going to get, points for that as well. It's a fun dynamic. This is one of the more silly and kind of, yell at your friends kind of trick-taking games that's out there because of the pirates and the sail-aways and stuff. It has a great dynamic to it. That's my number 6, Skull King. Number 5 is Nyet. Nyet is a cool one because it has the common elements of a trick-taking game. You have a trump suit that is determined by the players at the table. There's also a super trump where the value 1 card of the super trump suit can even supersede trump cards. And then you have, the first player, you can determine who that is, and you can determine how many points each trick taken will be worth. The way that you do this is there's a central board, and you are going to say no, or Nyet, to one of the things out there. So you look at your hand of cards for the round and you say Nyet, no to red being the trump suit for this round. And the next person at the table says no to yellow being the super trump. And the next person says, no, I don't want tricks to be worth 2 points per trick 1 this round. And then you just keep going around in the circle saying nope to something. I don't want yellow to be trump. I don't want blue to be trump. Bam. Green is the trump suit for this round. And then you keep eliminating options about how many points each trick will be worth this round. Tricks could be worth -3 points if people keep saying no to things and saying, like, I don't think I have a very good hand. I think I'm going to lose a lot of tricks. So I want to stick the person who wins a lot of them with negative points. It's a very odd one, and I love this dynamic that there's a little bit of a pre-game before each round in how you say no to the different little characteristics that make up a trick-taking game. Because of that, this is not a great introductory one, but once you know a few of those elements, and as soon as you can read a hand, I think this one is super rewarding to play. I really like Nyet, and that's why it's my number 5. My number 4 is a social deduction trick-taking game, and that's called Shamans. This game surprisingly works. From the description, from the way that it was explained, I thought, how do you use trick-taking, in a social deduction game? But as I saw it start to unfold, I thought this works oddly really well. There's the Shamans team and a Shadow team in this game. If you play, it plays 3 to 5 players, and it works well at any player count, but I think the 3 is a really interesting dynamic because it's so tight and tense. One of the 3 people at the table is a shadow player, the bad player. And how the Shamans, so the Shamans win the round if everybody plays all of their cards. The Shadows win if they can run this tracker off the board. And so you run that tracker off the board by playing cards off suit. Someone leads with purple, and the other people play yellow because they don't have purple. That runs the shadow track forward. So you have something to kind of go off of, suspecting the other players at the table, when they say, oh, I couldn't follow suit, so I'm playing this card that's off color, and it moves the bad track forward. Or they really might not have had a card of that color. And so you can kind of read into people's intentions and the way that they're playing, the way that they set up the next lead suit as well. And you collect little items, and then you collect daggers, and you can kill someone at the table if you suspect them. But you don't want to kill someone if you don't really suspect them. If the Shamans can also win if they eliminate the shadow player. This dynamic is so strange and a little bit hard to explain. We did a live play of it, and there's also a review of it. If this sounds at all interesting, using trick-taking in a social deduction formula, this is one that you really should check out. I like it a lot, and that's why Shamans is my number 4. My number 2 is a 2-player only trick-taking game, and this is my favorite of all of the 2-player only trick-taking games that I've played. It's called Claim. This is one that I'm kind of late to the party to. I've only found it recently, but I really like this. This is a kind of a riff on a classic standard deck of card trick-taking game called German Whist, where in Claim, how it works is you have the whole deck of cards, which is enough for each player to play 2 hands, 2 rounds of the game. You deal out the first half to each player, and then you have a remaining deck of cards on the side. You flip that top card over, and now my opponent and I are playing a 2-player trick-taking game. Whoever wins this trick will win the face-up card on the side for the second half of the game. Whoever loses it will get the top face-down card of the deck. So there are times you reveal a really terrible card that you're playing for, and you say, I want to lose this round if possible. And then there's sometimes a really great card, and you say, I want to win this round if possible. And so every one of those, you're gaining cards for the second half of the game. The cards that you played in the first half go away, and then you play the second half based on the cards that you earned in the first half of the game. But now when you play the second half of the game, every card that you win goes into a scoring pile in front of you. At the end of the game, you look at your scoring pile, and you want to have majority of the 5 different suits that you're playing in that game. And so you want to have majority in 3 of the 5 suits. It's an awesome dynamic. There are special powers for each of the different suits. Some of them will, even a lower value of one suit will win against any number of a different suit. Some of them have special effects in the first half of the game where you can score them right away. Some of them have special effects in the second half of the game. There's a lot of little things going on that I think makes Claim a fantastic 2-player little trick-taking game. And if you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of different boxes of it, but just basic Claim is super fun. And maybe I'll try some of the expansions, maybe they're neat. But I just like the basic one. That's my number 3, Claim. My number 2 is the easiest trick-taking game on my list. It's Marshmallow Test. This is a Reiner Knizia game. This is even a simplification of an earlier game of his called Voodoo something. I forget in the moment, right? But hey, Marshmallow Test is a really great one because it is so dead simple. There's not a lot of extra rules. There's not a lot of extra stuff. You don't even use a trump suit for the first round of the game. That gets introduced in the second round onward. So for the first chunk of the game, you're just playing cards out. The neat trick to it that works so well is that you are playing to a certain determined number of tricks based on player count. So let's say we're playing a 3-player game. The first person to get 4 tricks in front of them will earn points based on how many tricks the other players at the table have earned up to that point. So ideally, you want the other players to have as many tricks as possible, and then you want to be able to earn your 4th trick, and then you can score based on how many tricks they've played. But once everybody except for one person has earned points, has gotten their 4th trick for the round ends. So one person will not get any points for that round. The compensation being that next round after you deal out the cards, they get to pick the trump suit. It is a fantastically simple trick-taking game. I like it so much despite its simplicity, in part because it's one of the most teachable trick-taking games out there. I think this is a great tool if you want to teach it to kids or to people who never played trick-taking games growing up, because it's an odd genre of games to kind of understand the cadence and the nuance. This teaches so many good elements, so fantastic. Marshmallow Test, my number 2, highly, highly recommend it. Even for people who have experience playing them, I think it's a neat, easy one. And my number 1 is my number 1 pretty much by far. It's The Crew. Either one of the crews is great. This is the only cooperative one on my list, and I imagine that we're going to see more cooperative trick-taking games come out in the future, trying to kind of ride on the coattails of this one, because this one did something really neat and clever, and it's incredibly engaging. There's a 50 scenario booklet you can kind of move through, or you can just kind of deal out a little scenario and try to play it. You want to try and get the right types of cards to the right players by the end of the hand, and if you've done that, you've won the round. It's really great. The Mission Deep Sea, the second game, the follow-up, also has a lot more interesting little objectives. One player wants to win exactly 2 tricks, and another player wants to win no pink cards. How do you make those 2 things happen? The fact that it's cooperative means that you are learning some of these trick-taking, little ideas together, and so yes, it helps if you have a background in trick-taking games, but even if you've not played any, this game will kind of teach you how to read other people's hands and their intents when they play certain cards, what information is being given, what information is being withheld, but you can kind of infer. So The Crew is fantastic. I won't talk too long about it because if you like trick-taking games, you've probably heard of it. If you don't like trick-taking games, you've probably heard of it, but I really like it. It is by far my number 1 favorite. So I hope that was neat. If if you don't love The Crew, maybe the other 9 are interesting to you. If you've not heard of them, give them a try. I think that these 10 are great, and that's why it's on my list. So, what ones did I miss? Feel free to mention them in the comments. There are plenty that I've played, plenty of standard deck ones too. I'd love to hear about which ones are your favorite. Until next time, my name is Chris Yee. You have yourselves a fantastic day.